Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Kuya Silver. Chatting with Dave Lewis. Dave is the Vice President of Exploration over at Kuya Silver. Company is traded on the CSE under the symbol KUYA, on the OTCQB under the symbol KUYAF, and the Frankfurt Exchange 6MR1. Now, Dave, we're talking more exploration in this interview. I've had David Stein, the president and CEO, on recently to talk about the production that had just started back up at that Bethania Silver Project in Peru. We're shifting our focus a little bit more to Ontario at the Silver Kings project because just recently, April 21st, the company announced the final holes from the 2024-2025 drill program. These holes followed up on some high-grade silver intercepts that were announced back at the beginning of this year in January. I want to first get a bit of a big picture overview here on this Campbell-Crawford prospect. The headline of the news release says that the company discovers a new vein cluster, expanding the Angus target area to the west at the Campbell-Crawford prospect area. So again, this is exploration here. You're looking at new areas, new silver veins. What can you tell us about this Campbell-Crawford prospect now?
Sure, yeah, and thanks for having me on the show here, Corey. I appreciate that. So, with our Silver Kings project, it's located up in northeastern Ontario in the historic silver mining camp of Cobalt. And I mean, we've got a big land position. I think we've got about 140 square kilometers worth of property with a bunch of past producing mines on it. And the Campbell Crawford zone, it's a grassroots target. I mean, it's located about a kilometer from five major mines. But the one thing with this area is that it's located within the center of a rock unit called the Nipissing Diabase that's not particularly prospective for economic mineralization. I mean, it might have veins that are hosted within this diabase rock unit, but it's a flatline rock unit. You want to be either above it or below it for the economic veins. And with this Campbell-Crawford target, we're sitting about halfway through it. So it's about a 300-meter thick zone. We're give or take about 200 meters above the lower contact of this rock unit. So we identified this zone in 2022 for follow-up work, and it was pretty much based on our in-house developed structural model that we've put together here over the last couple of years in Cobalt. And in 2023, we drilled a brand new grassroots discovery, pretty much 2,400 ounce to the ton silver in an east-west vein that we're terming the Angus vein. So we did a bunch of trenching, we did some stripping off, we did follow-up drilling in 2023, identified that we've got east-west veins. The first one we call the Angus vein. There's one about 20 meters to the north, we call it the McNamara vein. And where these veins flex and bend at the lower diabase contact, this is where the silver mineralization occurs. Subsequent to that, we actually found another few veins, but now these are northwest trending veins, and they seem to terminate these east-west veins and act as a bit of a buffer on it. But we hit some high-grade silver on one vein we're calling the Tom's vein, which is a northwest vein. And then just late last year, in 2024, in the early stages of the drill program that I'm talking about here now, we hit some north-south veins that would probably fit between these east-west Angus and McNamara veins. And they were also running high-grade silver. They were running 1,500 gram to the ton. We announced this back in January of this year. Now, with the 2025 program, we set up to test these veins, and we put 8 holes in to do that.
Let's talk about that strategy then. Okay, so you're testing, in a way, kind of this new area, stepping out and around from some of the recent drill results. You only had 8 holes in here, I believe. What was the overall strategy? What were you hoping to prove out here?
Yeah, no, that's correct. Thanks. We did do 8 holes. I'd have to look at the overall total. I think it was about 2,000 meters that we did in 8 holes. But we set up to the west of these high-grade hits that we had on our Angus vein back in 2023, and we drilled to the east. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to target the corridor between these two east-west trending Angus and McNamara veins to test for these ladder structures. And I mean, to be honest, we had a bit of issue with the orientation. Some of the holes deviated a little bit too far, so we didn't quite get within this corridor with every single one of these holes. But we did hit these ladder veins. We did get some grades off these latter veins. We were able to show that there's three of them. But the other thing that was really nice about this setup, I mean, we've put a fair number of drill holes into this Campbell-Crawford target since we discovered it in 2023. But we've never tested from the west here before. And in 2024, we did a drone-based magnetic survey, very, very tightly spaced, and we were able to show that where this Angus and McNamara high-grade silver intersection occurs, it's in a flexure in the veins, and we were able to show that it's in a geophysical magnetic low. So the cold colors. And if you take a look back at the press release, you'll see these zones broken out. While when we set up to the west, we were able to test a second magnetic low here. Just, it was just one of the benefits of putting the drill in that position.
Let's talk about these results then, because look, the overall grade didn't have the grades that we saw in some of the higher grade results from past drilling. But as you said, you were testing some newer areas too, and you were stepping out. However, you could say that this drilling is still happening in a generally tighter area. But that's what happens when you're drilling silver veins. Talk to us about what these results tell you in terms of potential scale or at least size to this asset.
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess with respect to this, we're finding out the more we drill here, and it's not necessarily reflected on surface, but we've got at least three orientations of mineralized veins that we're looking at here. And so, I know that we've put a lot of drill holes into this target area, but we're still recognizing new structures here on occasion, specifically these latter veins. So I guess the first thing I'd like to talk about is this second vein cluster, because to me, this is the major thing that we pulled out of this round of drilling here. We were able to show, and this is above our diabase rock contact, which I think in this area is about 225 or 250 meters below surface. We were able to show that there's veins that penetrate through this rock contact, extend upwards into the slightly unfavorable diabase rock unit, but they're still mineralized. And with this mineralization, I mean, we hit, I would call mid-grade cobalt, and keep in mind that the cobalt sort of grades in and out with the silver. So if we hit cobalt, we're on the right structure for what we want. But we hit mid-grade cobalt 100 meters up within the diabase, and we were able to show that there's a very, very similar cluster of veins from, our first pass drill program that, superficially at this point looks very, very similar to what we hit with the Angus and McNamara flexure, which is just a little bit further over to the east. So it's basically a continuation of the same zone, just stepped over and slightly offset to the west. So that's great. We also had some other low-grade cobalt hits in some of these veins here, and with our chemical modeling, what we're doing is we're trying to vector in on specifically where we should target follow-up drilling in our next phase of drill program to sort of expand on this area. So from my mind, I love the fact that we've now shown that one of these magnetic low zones that we've identified through geophysics is hosting high-grade silver. Now we're getting hints that there's a second high-grade silver zone further over to the west. Well, we've got several of these targets that were identified through this geophysical survey on our Campbell-Crawford property and the nearby Air Geod property, which is pretty much continuous with it. With respect to the latter veins, when we were targeting these latter veins between the Angus and the McNamara veins, so now we're stepping back over to where we've had our other hits, we did hit some higher grade silver. I think we hit 359 grams silver in some of these veins with about 0.08% cobalt. But where these veins occur, they're actually being disrupted by some of the rocks below the Nipissing diabase. So we've got volcanic rocks, and then next to them we've got what's called porphyritic rock, or an intrusive rock, it seems at this point. And the veins, they're bending and refracting around this porphyritic rock, but it seems that porphyry is probably the original reason why these veins are there. So I'm encouraged by this. It just means that we need to go through, tighten up our modeling here in the next few months, which is exactly what I intend to do for part of the summer before we do any follow-up drilling. But I mean, we did hit some good cobalt numbers in some of these veins, and if we hit them in this porphyritic unit, it might mean that we just need to hit them in the volcanic rocks here, which should be right next to it. Third thing we hit in this drill program is that with respect to the rocks below the diabase, we've got a series of sedimentary rocks caught up between the volcanic rocks. They're called black shales, but they have sulfur in them. But we're seeing that where these black shales occur right near some of the mineralized veins, quite often what's happening is that the mineralization in the veins is actually upgrading or enriching the mineralization in these black shales. So we had one example where we hit, it was actually our highest grade silver result in the program, in the 2025 program, 441 grams silver, but we hit 11% cobalt in that, sorry, not cobalt, copper in that interval as well. And the copper seems to be directly associated with the veins, but it's nice to see that we're getting an upgrade of rock units outside of the main veins that's also being shown to be potentially economic. And I mean, 11.5% copper is pretty much, I would suggest that should be an economic deposit if we've got enough of it. Now, other mines nearby, specifically Beaver Temiskaming, which occurs to the southeast, it was a 20 million ounce silver producer, and I've seen photographs at depth because I mean it's been mined out and closed here now for probably 40 years. But I've seen photographs at depth where they do have similar black shales that are heavily mineralized right next to these silver cobalt veins that we're chasing. Now, whether they're economic at this point, I'd say it's maybe a little bit too early to tell, but if we've got these mineralized silver cobalt veins plus enriched black shales, I think this is a really good position for us to be in. The other thing is I will say that we've hit these mineralized black shales in some of the other holes. I think I put in the press release our hole 23 SK29. We hit 20 meters of very anomalously and potentially significant base metal mineralization plus silver plus cobalt in these black shales. So it's probably not just a one-off. This could be a fairly common thing at depth below Campbell-Crawford. And I mean, at this point, it looks like we've got at least 3, maybe 4 of these bands or these beds of black shales that have the potential to be further enriched in mineralization.
So, Dave, can you simplify all this then in terms of big picture? What's possible at this Silver Kings project? I realize it's still early on exploration, but it sounds like you're finding a whole lot of different vein clusters, but how do you go even about tying them all together here?
Yeah, I've been asked this a few times, and I know it's been a recurring question. Appreciate you bringing it up here. What we're really looking at doing at Campbell Crawford. I mean, the flexure zone that we've got on the Angus and McNamara, if that's all we've got, I mean, we haven't done any resource estimation on it to date, whether it's economic on its own or not. I don't know. But at the same time, if we can show that there's a whole series of these high-grade flexure zones or these high-grade chutes, and so let's say we've got one at the Angus McNamara one, a second one with this new press release that we're seeing here now, and then a third one further to the west as identified in our geophysics. I mean, we've got several other targets that are looking very similar to this within our Campbell-Crawford and Air Geod properties here. But if we can start tying this together into a bigger zone as opposed to, just a one-off zone at potentially at Angus and McNamara, that's what I really want to do. But we really do need to build this area up, and I'm very happy that we were able to start putting together the foundation of a follow-up drill program to test the second cluster to the west. That's part of the strategy at Silver Kings. Ideally, I'd like to test some of the other targets that we've got, follow up on our Frontier Northwest target down in Silver Center, start bulking that up so that we can show that we've got more than one deposit within the Silver Kings project. The other thing that I want to mention for Kuya Silver as a company, not just the Silver Kings project, is that we just closed a $2.9 million raise here. With a lot of that money that's going to be directed towards the Bethania project, we're looking at doing obviously we're looking at doing some work down there in the very short term, including some surface mapping and try and expand on the footprint and build on what we've been building on at Bethania.
All right. Well, thanks for that update. I was going to ask more about Bethania. Just, I guess, one follow-up question on future work plans at Silver Kings then. Are you ready to get a drill back on the ground here? Do you need to do more surface work to further isolate some targets before you get back drilling?
Yeah, great question, Corey. Every time that we go through and do one of these drill programs, we get a huge amount of data that comes in all at once, and we need time to go through and process that, especially when we're dealing with very narrow but high-grade veins where the mineralization changes across trend, where the orientation can change across trend. We need to go through, bulk up our 3D model at depth. And I mentioned this porphyry unit at depth. We need to go through and evaluate with the drill holes that we've got here right now what the significance of that is, how it relates to mineralization. I mean, if this is our nucleation point for the mineralization, we need to get a better handle on it. And we've traced it for about 350 meters, a long trend here to date in the drilling, and it's still going strong. So we've got to follow up on that. We need to go through, process the chemistry. I mean, this is how we've been targeting some of these other vein structures here in our last drill program in 2024, in late 2024. Ideally, I'd like to do a bit more surface exposure of the bedrock. We're doing a BSc thesis here that started in, well, eminently looking at some of the faults and their potential relation to mineralization. So, I mean, long story short, we've got a lot of work to do here before we get a drill back on site. I mean, in my ideal world, I'd like to get a drill on site September, something like that, just because I don't want to be wasting dollars that are hard to come by, and I want to make sure they're being spent and used as efficiently as possible, and make sure that, you know, that as best as possible every drill hole counts. And I mean, with the success rate that we've had here at Campbell-Crawford so far, I think we're doing well, and I just want to make sure that we're able to reproduce the results that we've had at our Angus and McNamara flexure, and see if we can reproduce this in these new clusters that we're starting to uncover here now.
Okay. Dave, thank you for the update here. Again, Dave Lewis, Vice President of Exploration at Kuya Silver. I'm going to post a link in the show notes to the Kuya website, and click that link, learn a bit more about some of those recent results and also what's been happening at Bethania. Also listen to some of the past interviews that I've had with David Stein. Dave, thank you again for this update, and I'm sure I'll be chatting with someone from the Kuya team again as we get some more news, either on the production front at Bethania or more exploration at Silver Kings.
Corey, thanks very much. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again.